evening.
Yes,
Welcome
but
to the special
regulars
snow
are-
edition of the January 27th, 2026 Board of Adjustment meeting. Just for the record, for those who are in the audience or perhaps online, the request, we have received a request from Lisa Page Reyes, owner. It's actually new business C, Lisa Page Reyes, owner, and Chris Ward, applicant for a property located at 238 Austin Street. That has been postponed until our February meeting. So if anybody is here for that application, that is postponed to the February meeting. The next thing that I will ask is for a motion to suspend the rules to take another postponement request out of order.
Madam Chairman, motion to suspend the rules?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And I will be abstaining on this
Okay.
procedural matter.
All right. So the request is for new business E, request to postpone the request of Regan Electric Company Incorporated owner and Chimberg Development applicant for property located at 94 Langdon Street and 98 Cornwall Street, whereas relief is needed to merge the lots, demolish the existing structures, and construct 3 new single-family dwellings, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 88 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 139, lots 1 and 8, and lies within the mixed residential business district. There's been a request to postpone this. I'm not sure if we have a date certain as to when they want to postpone to, or
It would be March.
it would be March. So, all in favor of postponing this application until March, or is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No one is voted against, and Mr. Rayum is recused from the vote. Okay. So now we will move on to the old business tonight, which is for 3 motions request for rehearing on A, B, and C, and I think we should take these in order. We received a request to appeal from the abutters for administrative appeal for 58 Humphreys Court, and also 58 Humphreys Court request for a rehearing, administrative appeal by the owners, and then an appeal for a request for rehearing on the granting or the denial of the variances. So again, I would like to take these in order. Mr. Sullivan?
Can I make a statement for the record before we start, which is this? I was not present at the meeting in which the board made these decisions. However, I have reviewed the recordings of the meeting and reviewed the record of the proceedings, and therefore, I believe I am qualified to vote on the request for rehearing tonight.
Okay. And those are the requirements. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So let's take the first one, which is, I can bring it up on my iPad here, which is B, the request of Robert M. Snover Revocable Trust, owners of 58 Humphreys Court, to appeal the decision by the BOA to grant the request of abutting appellants, owners of 54, 44, 43, 53, 63, and 75 Humphreys Court, for appeal of the administrative decision of a zoning determination pertaining to the side and rear lot lines of the property for a proposed subdivision located at 58 Humphreys Court. Said property is located on Assessor Map 101, Lot 47, and lies within the General Residence B and Historic Districts. I'll throw it out to the board for thoughts, motion, consideration. Mr. Sullivan?
I could say something just to kick things off, if you would allow it. This is a request for rehearing. The statute that authorizes, in fact requires requests for rehearings, says that the board should vote to grant a rehearing if it finds good reason to do so. The same statute says another thing, however. It requires an applicant to list in the motion for rehearing every reason that they feel that the board has erred. And and if they do not list a reason in the motion for a hearing, they cannot use it in a later appeal to Superior Court. Now, if you think about those two things, it really, that system forces an applicant to put things in a motion for rehearing that it doesn't really think are the good reasons for the board to have a rehearing. They rather put them in there to preserve them for a later appeal. So therefore, every time the board sees a motion for rehearing, it would not be unexpected for there to be things in the motion for rehearing which actually weren't intended to bring about the rehearing. They're just being preserved for an appeal. So with that thought in mind, I've been thinking about, well, what is a good reason for a rehearing? And, you know, the cases talk about, well, the main function of a rehearing is to allow the board to correct any perceived errors that it sees in its proceedings before a court will come along later on and correct them. And so, with that thought in mind, I had a few further thoughts about motions for rehearing. One of which is simply a restatement in a motion for rehearing of the very same things that the board heard at the hearing would pretty much never be good reason for a rehearing. And really the board, in looking for what is a good reason or not a good reason, should focus on that the element of the request, which is to give this board a chance to correct errors before they get to a court where a court will correct them. So when you think about all of those things that I've just said, it really means, and in fact, the record statewide shows that most rehearings are not going to be granted. However, some will, where the board feels that they see good reasons that they want the rehearing to be held. And so I wanted to say one further thing. In some of these issues that are being brought forward for rehearing tonight, had I been on the board at the time the votes were taken, I believe I would have voted differently than the board did. However, once the board, by majority vote, has taken an action, then it is my belief that the members of the board thereafter should support the action taken by the full board, unless, again, there is good reason not to. And that means that there will be cases where a board member might have voted to, say, deny a variance. But when the rehearing request comes along to have a rehearing of that denial, the board member might vote to uphold it. Just because the board as a whole has voted, and in order for a board to function properly, I believe, the board's decision deserves some weight and credibility going forward. So those are all of my thoughts as we're going to these requests for rehearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Rayam, or Mr., I don't know who was first. Mr. Rayam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for this, I do believe ultimately it was my motion that ended up being the successful motion with regards to this application. We had a lot of discussion on this. I think the part that the applicant is sort of restating is, I think, the thing that the board felt most at peace with their decision. I think that there was, still the question of what's a side yard, and relative to this, is there multiple front yards, et cetera. Are the remaining yards one a side yard, one a rear yard? Are they both side yards? We were never able to close the loop on that aspect of it, but at the heart of what the applicant is, or the appellant is restating here, I think the board was quite thorough, and I think there was good understanding and conviction in our decision, saying that the 10-foot line that the planning director and staff had established as the rear property line was in fact incorrect. So with that, really, as Attorney Sullivan has indicated, really all that the applicant or the appellant, excuse me, has done here is sort of restated their original argument, restated what the board was considering, without really saying how there was an error, other than perhaps there was some discussion about the notice of decision not being quite written correctly, but regardless of that, above, they were still requesting an appeal of the decision as a whole. And I think that the board actually was, I do not see where there was any error that the board made in coming to that aspect of the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. Mr. Nees?
I agree with Mr. Ram on the substantive point. I guess I'm a little confused on the notice of decision. I think the notice of decision could be possibly interpreted the way I'm not quite sure how to refer to this, the appellant here mentions it. I think it could be more clear. What I'm uncertain on is whether, in order to clarify the record of the notice of decision, whether we need to go through a rehearing in order to do that. If you read the notice of decision, I think it isn't really clear that what the board's decision was, which was, briefly, we don't like what the planning department did, but we never recommended or said how it should be done. And I think the notice of decision is a little unclear on that differentiation here, because it says we granted, again, I get mixed up on who's the applicant, who's the appellant, because we're talking about multiple decisions here, because we granted let's see, or maybe we didn't grant, anyway. Because of our decision, I think it's a little unclear the way the notice of decision is written. I'll stop there because I'm getting tangled in my own words.
Mr. Mattson?
Yeah, if I could just add to that. I guess, yeah, basically, it seems to me that the board agreed with the appellant's appeal so that both of us don't agree with what the planning director's interpretation was, but that does not mean we agree with the appellant. And whether or not that's clear in the notice of decision, I think I agree with Tom. But I wouldn't be in favor of a rehearing based on how we behaved during the meeting. But if that notice of decision would be if the best way to address that potential ambiguity, that if both parties disagree with another party, it doesn't mean that they agree with each other.
Anything else?
Just,
Mr. Rossi, you look like you're about to say something.
I was, but now that you said that, I can't remember what it was. No, I think the board deliberated all of these issues that are brought forward in today's matter appropriately. We made a decision. What's being done here is questioning whether or not it was the right decision, not the way that we made the decision. So I don't see any grounds for this particular appeal. I would not be in favor of granting a rehearing on this matter.
Okay. I'm just looking at the notice, the action sheet. The notice of decision says that the board voted to uphold the appeal of the appellant and overturn the decision of the code official. So I think it's pretty clear that the planning director's interpretation was not upheld by the board.
Correct.
Mr. Hayes?
Where I think the confusion comes in is because it says we upheld the appeal. The appellant said how they felt it should be measured, and we didn't uphold that part of their appeal. We just said we don't agree with the planning director. we specifically said we didn't agree, well, we didn't say how it should be done, and we didn't accept what the appellant said about how it should be done. I think therein lies the confusion, and I don't know if there's a simple administrative way to correct that. I got the impression from the email we got today that the preference of the planning staff is that we hold a rehearing to clarify that decision.
I guess I see it, well, I'm the chair, so I want to see if there's any other comments before I
Just
speak.
one other comment from my standpoint. We're talking about a hypothetical lot that does not even exist, and I would be loath to spend this board's time on a rehearing for a lot that only exists in imagination.
I think I see it a little bit more simply, respectfully. I think that we voted to uphold the appeal. It doesn't mean that the appeal of the appellant was granted by this board. I do not read it to mean that we agreed with the appellant's view of, or what grounds there were for the appeal. That's how I read it. I read it pretty simply. And so I myself would be against a rehearing on this, but perhaps the staff can explain what. I did not see the emails before today, so I was busy. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan.
Well, as the chair has stated, I too would be against holding a rehearing on this particular request. However, the applicant's motion allows another option. It reads, "The notice of decision should be clarified to reflect the true nature of the board's decision, or the board should grant the rehearing." So the board member could make a motion now to grant or deny the rehearing, but a board member could also make a motion to clarify the notice of decision in any way that the board member felt.
That's a good idea. That was your motion, right, originally?
Yes, I'm just going to let our planning aide speak to us.
Yeah, just to speak to the email I sent earlier today. It's not my job to be for or against any rehearing, just to give you the information you need to make your decision. The question before me earlier today was if there's confusion in a notice of decision, what's the best way to rectify that? And that would be, if there was confusion and the board decided there was confusion, I would say that would be grounds for a rehearing. It's still the board's job to decide if that is actually what's happening here.
Okay, all right, thank you, Steph.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Neese?
Yeah, and I guess if you go back and look at the language of what the appellant asked for, the specific language was, "We respectfully request that the ZBA reverse Mr. Britz's October 21st, 2025 determination and rule that both the southerly and easterly boundaries of proposed Lot 1 are rear lot lines." Now, our motion didn't address both those points on purpose. The notice of decision says we ruled in favor of the appellant's request. And I think that's where the confusion lies. If you one way to interpret that is they had two parts to their request and we approved both of them. The other way to look at it is our motion is specific and only addresses part of their request. And I think that's, open to interpretation. Whether the board thinks that's clear or not is, where we're at. If we think that's an unclear notice of decision, then I think, we may need to, unless there's some other way to do it, to clarify it, as Mr. Sullivan suggested. If we can clarify it that way, I'm all for that. But I think we somehow need to make sure that the decision is clear.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ram?
Yeah, so could staff clarify how are notices of decision generated? I know when I was the chair, I recall how the process was done, but could you just explain, at least in this case, how was the notice of decision, how was the wording of it generated, and how did it come to be signed?
The notice of decision is generated from the words that you say when making a motion. So when a member makes a motion, I make a motion to XYZ, that we try to take that exact language and put it in the letter of decision.
Okay, because what was written in the letter of decision doesn't sound like what I recall my motion to be, so I'm not sure in this particular instance how that might have occurred.
Okay.
But, so planning staff generates it, and then the chair reviews it and signs it? Is that correct?
Chair does not review it.
So notice the decision does not have the chair's signature on it?
It does have the chair's signature, but the last chair, well,
Okay,
I guess she wasn't sitting for this one, but we generate it and we issue it.
okay. All right, that wasn't my process when I was there. If something has my signature on it, I'm gonna know what it says, but, okay,
Sure, yeah, and different chairs do it differently.
sure. All right, understood.
If I could just add, yeah, so I guess, my thoughts are I would certainly rather have a clarification of the notice of letter of decision as opposed to a rehearing. And the way or nothing, but, because the way I interpret the notice would not require a rehearing, and, the way I interpret it, is consistent with how we meant it, even if it doesn't express the fullness of the deliberations. My only concern is that I guess I don't know, but if there's potential detriment to letting it be potentially interpreted other ways in the future for the city or the board or whatnot.
Mr. Mantle?
I'd like to make a motion. Like to make a motion.
Before we get to a motion, I just want to put, and I don't mean to muddy the waters, but I'm just looking at our rules for the motion for rehearing, and I do not know if the clarification of a notice of decision can properly be done during a motion for rehearing. That is my concern. So, I don't know if staff or anybody has any thoughts on that, but, you know, usually we just decide to rehear it or not. I have not, in my time here on the board, actually done something substantive and done a clarification to a notice of decision. And I think that might exceed the bounds of our rules, sorry to say. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, it would certainly be unusual to clarify the notice of decision. And it's not expressly authorized by the statute or any rules. However, you have a heated controversy involving important issues and a lot of people. And if someone on the board felt that the situation could be clarified by a motion to clarify, then I personally feel it would be a good idea to do it.
Within this rehearing, so. Okay, Mr. Mantle?
I'd like to make a motion to direct the planning staff to issue a more clarified, detailed notice of decision for Humphreys Court, and to deny all three requests for rehearing.
We have to take them individually.
Okay, well, let's just do the motion for the planning department to clarify, rewrite the notice of decision for Humphreys Court.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay. So discussion on the motion? I'm sensing a little skepticism.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment, which might be similar, but basically, I'm in favor of the motion, but it might be useful to have it be, or more useful to have it be specific to, or at least for me, the fact that we're granting the appellant's appeal, but that doesn't mean that we agree with them, which I agree that the more detailed version would say that, but having the
Correct,
explicit-
addressing everything that's in these motions right now. Yeah, to remove any, oh, this seems like, or this says, yeah,
the problem is that the clarification may itself raise other issues, so that's what I see, that slight problem, but, Mr. Rayum, or Mr. Sullivan, I forget.
Your choice.
I actually had not raised my hand, but I will.
Okay, I think it was Mr.
Yes.
Rayum.
I had raised my hand, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm starting to think increasingly this situation is just so muddied that the only cleanest way, as painful as that option would likely be, would be to grant a rehearing, try to see if we can once again come to a point where we have an agreement on something. And heck, maybe we'll even be able to, work through the sidelines issue on this fictitious case, and, be able to sort of give the planning department staff some direction on that in the future. And then make sure that the notice of decision that is sent out is crystal clear about what the board tried to present. Because from what you described, that does not sound like the motion that I recall making, so.
So, any thoughts, Mr. Neese?
I'm in favor of doing this the easiest and cleanest way we can. I think if you go back and look at Mr. Rayum's motion, which I think I seconded, it's very clear about what we did and that we did not take a stance on how the lots should be measured and whether things were side yards and rear yards and everything else. His motion had 2 sentences to it. One of them said, we don't think the planning director did it right. The other was, we don't take a stance on how it should be measured. I think if the notice of the decision is edited to reflect the motion that's in the minutes, that's on the record, then I'd be happy with that. If we can go forward that way. That's my only question.
Okay.
May I ask just a question? I agree with the statement that just got made, but I'm trying to think, how do we get to that point? Right now, the motion would direct the planning staff to rewrite the letter of decision.
And one other comment towards that end, planning staff can write it. My opinion, if it's signed by the board chair, then it's really the board chair. The action needs to be directed to the board chair. Ultimately, that individual is responsible for the content of the notice of decision if it's signed by that person. That's just my thought.
Yes, I agree. All right, so we do have a motion on the table, so I don't know if there is a desire of the motion maker and the seconder to withdraw that motion. It seems that we may want to go the route that Mr. Neese and perhaps Mr. Rayum had opined about, the fact that the motion itself was very clear about what we were doing. But I think that, wait, Steph is doing something, so I just want to confirm.
What's the motion on the table?
The motion was to clarify,
Clarify the notice of decision.
Have planning staff
Yeah.
take that action. That was the.
so I think Steph is bringing up the meeting minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
I am. I don't know if it'll change the discussion, but.
Okay. And I actually think that we do have the meeting minutes on our iPads from the
Probably
last
on our
meeting.
iPads, yeah.
We do.
So we can,
Mr. Rayum's motion. So what I don't have is, what was the actual letter that's being quoted?
we do not have the notice of decision.
So it's
It
really,
is linked in your.
It is available online. It's just not in the main packet.
okay. How do we get to that?
It's definitely in the archived section on the website, but I'm not sure. It might have been an attachment as well.
Madam Chair, if you'd like, I have it in front of me. I can read the motion that Mr. Rayum made.
I just want to see, because we had amended these meeting minutes, so I would prefer for actually Steph to look at what she has after we had amended it.
That is what I'm looking at. Hold on one second. to clarify, we are talking about a rehearing request from the abutters of 58 Humphreys Court that determines what a side and rear lot line is.
An appeal.
An appeal, yes. Okay, so what is, and I'm wondering if maybe you read the wrong section.
No, it's, oh, okay, oh, you mean on your iPad, okay.
Yeah. So what is written in the action sheet, which should be the same as the minutes and the same as the letter of decision, reads, the board voted to grant the appellant's appeal of the zoning determination by the planning director Peter Britz regarding the classification of the rear lot lines for the proposed subdivision at 58 Humphreys Court. Further, the zoning board of adjustment makes no determination on the classification of side lot lines for the proposed subdivision.
I personally believe that is sufficiently clear communication of what we did, so. I see no need to clarify.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what's showing up here when I'm.
yeah. And I apologize, I guess I was looking at the wrong action sheet.
It's very confusing.
So, okay, so with that knowledge, I wonder if the maker of the motion and the seconder would have any interest in withdrawing their motion?
To what end?
I think we have clarified what the decision was based upon what Steph just read out.
So the notice, the decision is clear, I withdraw the motion.
Is that okay with the second?
I'll concur.
Okay, so let us go back to whether or not we would like to move for a rehearing on this matter. Mr. Sullivan?
I would move that the rehearing request be denied.
Okay, and is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, your motion?
Well, it's just based upon this entire discussion which has just taken place, but the sum total of it is that the record is sufficiently clear.
Okay. And is there anything from the second?
As Mr. Sullivan stated earlier, and Ms. Riom also stated that all three requests for rehearing are just restating what we heard.
We are actually speaking just as to the first one. which
Understood.
is- Yeah. So let's just keep the comments on to that, as to that one
Okay.
motion, okay?
Okay. Nothing to add.
Okay. All right, so the motion is to deny the request for rehearing. I'm going to start, Mr. Neese,
Yes.
Mr. Mantle,
Yes.
I've got to get used to you. Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Rayum,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
and Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
And the chair also votes yes. The rehearing request is denied unanimously. Okay. So let us move on to okay. Let's see my chair's agenda here. Okay. The next matter of old business is B. Okay. This is not working. Is that B?
Yeah, it just says A for some
Oh,
reason.
okay.
But
Okay.
it is B.
So the next item of business today is room number 1, old business B, 58 Humphreys Court. The request of abutting appellants, owners of 54, 44, 43, 53, 63, and 75 Humphreys Court, to appeal the decision by the BOA to uphold the request of Robert M. Snover, Revocable Trust owners for property located at 58 Humphreys Court, for appeal of the administrative decision to require a variance for section 10.1530 pertaining to the lot area of the property located at 58 Humphreys Court. Said property is located on Assessor Map 101, Lot 47, and lies within the General Residence B and Historic Districts. Are there any comments or motions or
I would like
thoughts
to
on
make a
this?
motion.
Mr. Rossi?
I would like to move to deny the request for a rehearing.
Okay, and do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Mr. Mattson seconds. Your motion,
Okay, having reviewed the request for a rehearing and gone back and re-reviewed the minutes of our discussions and the conclusions that we reached in that discussion, I find that no new matters or facts have been raised in the appeal that would have a bearing on the board's decision or my view of the board's decision, and therefore I don't see a justification for a rehearing here.
okay. Anything from the second?
Yeah, I'll just add, while I did not vote in favor of the motion that is being appealed, I don't believe that we made an error in the outcome, so that's why I seconded the motion to not rehear the case.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion, Mr. Neese?
Yeah, I'll just pile on a little bit. I don't think there's any information in this that we didn't consider or that indicates we made an error in fact or in law. You know, there are a number of items, I won't list them all, where I think this letter makes some statements that aren't really true, that are not really accurate. We did discuss, for example, what was a public place. We asked extensively on a number of those issues, and I don't think anything has been presented in here that either was not discussed or is that new information or that demonstrates we didn't follow the law.
Okay. Any, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I will be supporting the motion. Just, you know, there was a couple things that were raised in this appeal. I just want to talk to, it does talk about, well, actually references a hard road to travel, New Hampshire law of local highways, streets, and trails. Interesting. But it basically comes to the conclusion, in these cases, the legal deeded property boundary may be the center line of the road. However, the center line is never used for zoning purposes, such as to establish front yard setbacks, lot area, or density calculations. To me, it almost reinforces what this board did in saying that really it's the deeded property lines as discussed in the applicant's deed, and really sort of divorcing it from any kind of reference point of where a city street is located. There's also some discussion about another case that talks about sounds like a mobile home park. And again, in there, it says, it talks about in computing the size of lots, land containing streets, public or private, which give access to the lot is excluded. And I think that's an important aspect to that determination, and that this is a very different situation than saying, calling, you know, roads that are leading into a much larger lot that are going to provide access to individual units in some substructure would somehow could potentially not constitute part of the available lot area. So I just think they're very different and not really applicable to what we were considering.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham. Is there any other thoughts, discussion on the motions? Mr. Sullivan?
My comments on the motion flowed directly from my observation about the analytical approach to motions for rehearing, which I made earlier tonight. Let me start by saying this. In reviewing the meeting of the board at which this decision was made, I concluded as I was watching it that I would have sided with the planning director. And of course, the board did not side with the planning director. Therefore, the board having made a decision, I feel that the decision should be upheld unless some good reason is presented to overturn it. And my review in comparison of the board's lengthy discussion of this issue on the night of the hearing and the material contained in the motion, well, a summary of my view is this. That little corner of land where the roadway curves around, of Humphrey Court, curves around over land which might otherwise have been deeded to the property owners, in light of everything that's already happened, that little piece of land is well-trodden ground. It was trodden by this board at its last meeting, and there really isn't any need to retrod it now, and therefore I would support this motion.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sullivan. Any other thoughts or discussion on the motion? Okay. So the motion is to deny the request, and I will start at that side of the board. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes. Aye.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayum?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the motion to deny the rehearing request is denied unanimously. Okay. We'll move to the last piece of old business, which is C. The request of Robert M. Snover, Revocable Trust, owners of 58 Humphreys Court, to appeal the decision by the BOA to deny the request of Robert M. Snover, Revocable Trust owners for property located at 58 Humphreys Court, whereas relief is needed to subdivide the existing parcel into 2 parcels, which requires the following. One, well, actually, this was one where we only, because of the overturning of the planning director's determination, the only variance that we actually voted on in this, for this application, was number 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow a 51.8 feet of continuous street frontage where 80 feet is required. Zoning requests B and C were determined to be moot. So, any thoughts, considerations, motions on this request for rehearing?
I have
Mr. Rossi?
a thought that I would like to share. In this case and in a lot of other cases, or the appellant makes the argument that we did not sort of constrain ourselves to defining the neighborhood as being those properties that are within the same zoning district as the property in question. And I find it interesting, generally speaking, that land use attorneys come before this board all the time, and depending on the needs of their clients, understandably, will say that we should only compare to things in the same zone, even though there's bordering zone right across the street. Or at other times, we'll make the argument that even though they're in one zone, the properties that are in a different zone constitute the neighborhood. So there's always debate about what is the neighborhood that we should be considering, and I think this is just another example of that. Having said that, since it was my motion, I think, that led to this, even within the zone, even if I were to take the argument from the appellant at face value, which I don't, even within that zone, it is not a unique property. There are 2 other corner lots that are quite large and would have perhaps similar arguments to make. So I don't think there's any new consideration here in the appeal, and therefore I would not be supporting the appellant's desire to have a rehearing on this.
Any other thoughts, considerations? Anything? Okay. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion,
Okay.
if I get a second.
Mr. Mantle?
You have to
What's
make
the
your
motion?
Yeah.
Oh, you'd like to know that, wouldn't you?
We're there already? It's-
Can
it's
we
only-
vote on it
it's
first
only
and then I'll
quarter
tell
of
you?
8.
The motion is to deny the request, the appellant's request for a rehearing on this matter.
And anything for your
Yes,
second?
I'll
Well,
just,
can I get a second before you speak to your motion?
I do appreciate the leap of faith.
I second the concepts of a motion.
yeah. Even though I'm laughing, I know none of these matters are to be taken lightly because there's, money and property rights behind them. I'm only laughing at the interaction on the board. I think the matter is a serious one and should deservedly receive due consideration and serious thought from the board. So restating my earlier preamble to the motion, I think that the grounds for the appeal being based on what is proper for the board to consider as part of the neighborhood and whether one can look across the zones, the zoning districts that are in this area that one might consider to be the neighborhood. I do believe that is at the rightful discretion of the board to do that. And many times, land use attorneys rely upon us to do that in so-called transition areas. Therefore, I don't think it's a legal error for us to do that. Even having said that, I do not believe that even looking at strictly within this zone, the properties that are well within this zone, there are similar properties, and therefore the basis of the ruling that we made originally about hardship and the non-uniqueness of this property will stand even within that zone. Therefore, I find no basis to grant the appeal for a rehearing.
Any second?
Nothing more to add.
Any discussion on the motion? All right. So, I'll start over there, Mr. Nees,
Yes.
Mr. Mannel,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Rayam,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Chair votes no. The motion to rehear the variance denial has been defeated 6-1. Aye.
No.
Did I do something wrong?
The motion to deny passed.
Yes, I'm
6-1.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
6 to
Yes,
1?
the motion to deny passed 6-1.
Yep.
Okay. All right. With the old business out of the way, we will now turn to new business. Okay. So before we go on to new business, just a note for everybody, the applicant will be given 15 minutes to present. If more time is needed, please make a request to the board. Public comments, to, for, and against, are limited to 5 minutes per person. So with that, we will start with new business, item A. The request of Riggs Enterprises LLC owner for property located at 822 US Route 1 bypass, whereas relief is needed to place a new sign on an existing pole, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.1253.10 to allow a sign setback of 2.5 feet from a lot line where 20 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 160, Lot 29, and lies within the general business and general residence A districts. Who is here to speak to this application? Welcome. Could you please step to the podium and state your name and your address for the record?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Dennis Stoddard, and my address is 11 Steam Mill, York, Maine.
Okay. You can present your application, please. First of all, what is your connection to this application?
I'm the general manager and the owner's representative.
Okay, all right, please continue.
So we're building a new City Tobacco and Beverage location on the adjacent lot to the current City Tobacco and Beverage at 806 US Route 1. Bypass gas was demoed and basically put up our new building. All of this began back in 2024, I believe, quite some time ago. During site planning and the numerous visits by the general contractor and ownership through planning, this sign location was discussed and I was led to believe approved at that point, because we removed the old gas prices sign off of that 20-foot pole right on the entryway of that driveway. When it came time to submit the sign permit, I didn't expect there to be anything to be discussed. Thank you, Stephanie, for all of your help navigating to this point. Understanding that the setback is the reason that we're here. So speaking to the variance questions, the location of the existing sign pole where we intend to put our proposed sign, it has been in the same location for many years as a freestanding sign for the previous business that occupied this lot. It wasn't an issue in the past to public interest at that point. I don't see it becoming a detriment to public interest at this point either. The sign pole itself is 22 and a half, almost 23 feet from the roadside. Our lot line is approximately 17 feet from that. So by no means will the sign be on roadside. It'll just be closer to our lot line. In the spirit of the ordinance being observed this instance, the spirit of the ordinance is observed in the manner that we are not erecting a new sign that is not in accordance with the ordinance. We're just proposing the installation of a sign on the pole that was already in place. Substantial justice being done. Should this variance be approved, we'll be able to move forward with our site plan as expected to promote our business using this sign as a marketing tool, as do many other businesses on the bypass. But the majority of these freestanding signs are all in the same sight line, not meeting that 20-foot setback required, including the signs on both adjacent lots at the Penguin gas station and our current location at 806, which I sat before you on a Zoom meeting during COVID and got a variance for that sign to be erected in its location. The values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished by this variance being approved. The sign in its proposed location will have zero effect on anyone's property value. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Should the variance not be approved, we would not be able to utilize this freestanding roadside pylon sign as the previous business had done on this lot, as well as numerous other businesses do on the bypass. The ordinance setback of 20 feet would put the pylon sign in the middle of our parking lot entrance. And the site is done.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant from the board? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So looking at your, basically your layout, your plan on page 32 of our packet, kind of shows the proposed sign location, but up in the upper right-hand corner, sort of the northeast corner of the property, there's what is the original, well, there was two additional signs back when this was a Gulf station, and later, as you pointed out, bypass gas. There was two additional signs that were located on that corner of the property. As far as I can tell, they've been removed, but I just want to validate from you, there is no intent to restore those signs in any way, shape, or manner?
No, sir, they've been removed.
Okay, all right. Yeah, the giant,
The space age, Space Needle is gone.
well, yeah, it kind of looks like something off the side of, the interstates if you go out west somewhere. Sometimes you see these,
66.
like giant signs. Okay, excellent. And then the page before that, page 31, is sort of your sign, demonstration of your sign with the dimensions. And as you point out from the roadside, there is, considerable distance, still a little bit less than what our ordinance calls for. But I'm just curious, first of all, it's kind of an odd perspective because this actually appears to be facing in the westerly direction, which is actually the opposite of the direct flow of traffic along the Route 1 bypass in that direction. But your intent is your sign is going to be on both sides, both
Correct.
Direction. Okay, and it's going to be identical on both sides?
Yes.
Now, this does kind of look what you've illustrated here, kind of looks like a, modern LED type sign. Is that the intent? Is you're going to put up like an LED display sign or?
Yes.
Okay. And then my last and most important question is the changeable signs, part of our ordinance. The expectation is this will not be a changeable sign. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be static, one time a day it would change, basically in the morning when we opened.
Yep.
And that would be it.
Okay.
No motion, no animation.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Sullivan?
This is really an extension of Mr. Reno's request, but is it correct to say that this sign, other than its location on the existing pole, will comply in every other respect with the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll open up the public hearing on this. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come to the podium. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? thank you. Could you please identify yourself and state your address for the record?
Yes, Tony Coviello, 341 Dennett Street. Sort of not in favor. I'm not opposed. I'm hoping for some changes. So if that's, I can come back if you want to have someone else.
I mean, the next one would be those who would like
I'm
to
probably
speak
the only
to
one
or
here.
against.
Yeah.
Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition to this? There's no one on Zoom, so you may speak to the application.
Okay, thank you. I live at 341 Dennett Street, the street parallel just east of the bypass. We're not a direct abutter, but looking at the rear of all of our properties of people that live north of this lot have experienced disappointing changes. You know, the city went through great lengths to revise the zoning ordinance to put buildings up against the street. We had visions of maybe in 30, 40 years of having something like Route 1 downtown, where we're walking a walkable street with businesses right on the street. This property and others have come before this board, not you folks individually, maybe some of you, and you've granted variance to allow the building to be pushed back. So we lose that aspect of it. And what happens is you get these light poles, and so when we look out the rear of our property, especially in the winter right now, it's these glaring lights. And they were white before, now they're starting to be colors, and they jump out more when we walk by the window. I would argue that anybody living on our property would say that's a detriment to the value of our property value. Looking out the back, having a dull light before, now having bright lights and now colored lights, I think that's a detriment. If you look on the Google Maps, you can still get a street view of the previous property. It was a much smaller sign than what they're proposing now. So it's not replacing of an existing sign. If you go to Google Street View, you see it was a pretty monochromatic white sign with some numbers. There does appear to be, there was a conduit running up the sign, so it was my recollection is if it was lit, it was very dully, dimly, whatever the word is there. And I know you probably can't, you can't probably legislate, how bright they have it, or maybe you can. But this seems to be glaring and gaudy, what's there now. The pole is much taller than what was there before, and so I would ask that we don't mind living next to a commercial area like this. It's kind of nice to be able to walk out my door and get a coffee or a milk, just with a short walk down the street. I'm not saying these businesses shouldn't exist there. I just wish the sign was a little bit more in character with what the intent of the zoning ordinance was when it was rewritten and a variance was given, that we wouldn't get these large light signs. The height of the sign seems like decreasing it would actually be beneficial to the business. If you're going north, you're coming up and under the bridge, and your vision is restricted. So having a lower sign seems to me as a more appropriate sign for a user, for a customer coming in that area. So I think it would be better for the business as well. I know the neighborhood would appreciate the more they could kind of hide that sign in the front of the property. So I just take exception to saying the existing light pole. It's the existing new light pole that they installed. It's not the existing what was there stated previously. I do hope there was previous variances given to this property, and I hope those remain true, that if there's any illumination on this sign, that it follows the business hours and it's shut off when the business is closed. That would be appreciative. And then the hours of operation of the business is what was a previous a condition of operation in 1994. We hope that stays with the property as well. And I think that's the limit of my comments, but thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to, for, or against the application? No one's on Zoom? Okay. So seeing no one, I'm sorry, please.
I'd like to, Dave Grzybowski, I did the site work and everything on the property, and that pole is the existing pole, the same height, on the same concrete base. Upon planning board meetings, ZBA, and TAC, we cut, if anything, the pole went out towards the bypass. We cut the metal arms off to fit a new sign on, to bring it in a little back, to get as close as we could. So yes, that is the existing pole. We did install new conduit for power to get to the pole. That was the only change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andes, looks like you want to ask a question, perhaps?
Yeah, if I could ask a question of the last speaker.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I don't know what all this stuff means. I do know that the zoning ordinance has standards for lights, including when they can be on, and the intensity of illumination and everything. This sign complies with all those elements?
It
of the
does.
ordinance?
We went through TAC and review multiple times, and we had Zoom meetings and people call in. And, for example, the lights on the rear of the building were lowered in a direct downlight. The lights on the existing poles on 806 will be changed. They're a flat LED, which is more of a downlight. They have built-in reflectors, so you don't get light that shines back to Dennett Street. So we've tried to accommodate all of that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Oh. Could you please identify yourself and provide your address for the record?
I am Dennis Stoddard at 11 Steam Mill, York, general manager of the project. The brightness of the sign, it will be less than the 1,500 nits, which is mandated by the ordinance. The signs today, they can be dialed down to as dim or as bright as we want that. We will make sure that it is meeting the brightness requirement. And when we close, the sign goes to, we are closed, open again at 8 a.m. There's no illumination on it at night. It's basically a black sign with just closed, see you at 8 a.m. I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the facts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to, for, or against?
Second time.
Yes, you can.
I'm sorry, I've never heard of a public hearing where the board was able to ask members of the public question. So this is the image from Google Maps. I just hit photo. If you do Google Street View, this is the sign that was there. I don't know if you have the ability to do that. That was the sign that was there. That top portion was the only portion illuminated. This is the sign they're presenting that's already on site today. This is what it looks like. This is not dimmed down, so you don't have, so it's not reflective of the neighbors. I see this out of the back of our house. All of us that live on Dennett Street that abut this property or near this property see this out of the back of our house. We're just asking it to be more in like with what it was there before. And so that's not the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant, or, anybody else who would like to speak to, for, or against? Does the board have any follow-up questions based on comments for the applicant or members of the applicant's team? Okay, thank you. Seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing, and board, I'll ask for your consideration or a motion. Discussion? Mr. Rossi?
I'm sympathetic to the property owners on Dennett Street, but the variance request is really not related to the illumination of the sign or the intent or those aspects of the ordinance. There's no variance being requested for what the property owner is allowed by right. The variance only pertains to the setback of the sign pole from the street, and therefore I think that is really what we need to confine our deliberations to, regardless of how we feel about the plight of the homeowners on Dennett Street.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, consideration, Mr. Ram?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, I think the abutter is correct in that the sign that was previously on this specific pole was, and as the applicant has sort of admitted, was to one side of it, actually towards the Route 1 bypass side. So from our perspective for setback was probably even more egregious or similarly egregious to what the applicant is asking for today. There was, as I had pointed out, 2 other signs back when it was a Gulf Station and then later Bypass Gas that were even larger, probably not as maybe visible to the neighbors, but there was certainly that one sign that was, 50 feet-ish tall that was on the tripod sign. That was way up there. All that has been eliminated, so I do think that there is a positive step by the applicant to try and make the situation better. Our ordinance does call for a maximum illumination, as the applicant or the applicant's representative has indicated. It does talk to an internal illumination sign of having a maximum of 5,000 nits. So I don't know who goes around with the nit meter after the applicant puts the sign up, but presumably somebody checks that. Now, that said, I would kind of agree with the abutter in some sense that I think this new generation of these LED signs that we don't allow to be changeable, but can have different images on them, and just in general seem like they project more light. I'm not sure if our ordinance maybe needs another look at this latest technology. It was certainly written before this technology came along. Not sure if the nit meter picks up on everything. How do you, when the nit meter is there, how does it go, and what do you have for an image on the sign, since the sign can actually be changed? So that may be something that needs to be taken a look at. That said, as Mr. Rossi pointed out, that's not really the issue that's before this board. We're being asked for the placement of the sign, all the other characteristics of the sign, its height, its size, the fact that it's a freestanding sign are all allowed by the ordinance. The applicant has said, hey, we're going to comply with the ordinance. Whether the ordinance actually fully controls this type of sign in the right way may be something that the planning department, working with the planning board, needs to figure out for future updates to our ordinance. But that said, for us, not granting this would force the sign to be closer to the neighborhood and farther away from the road, which I don't think is necessarily a positive aspect. And similarly, I know the abutter did mention that this board granted relief. The only relief this board granted, as shown on page 29 of our package, was to allow parking between the road and the new building. And the argument being at the time was, hey, it would be more impactful on the neighborhood behind of having all those cars, for short-term visits coming in and out, and going past on the neighborhood side of the building, whereas the way our building is shaped, it's going to, sort of shield the neighborhood more from what is going on there. And that was the argument that I think the board bought into in granting that, for this particular property on the Gateway neighborhood. So with that, I would recommend, I think approving the applicant's request makes the most sense here.
Okay, so that sounds like,
I was gonna make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the variance request as advertised and presented.
do I hear a second? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't Mr.
Yes,
Sullivan?
I need to say something
Yes,
as soon
yeah.
as I can say it. The abutter or near abutter who spoke in opposition to this variance request is a very close friend of mine and a person who I hold in the very highest regard. As such, I question my ability to be objective about the matter, and I wish to recuse myself from the proceedings at this point and suggest that perhaps the alternate could vote in my place.
The only issue with that is usually the recusals are done at the beginning before the application is read into the record, and the alternate has the opportunity to actually, he has been, you've been listening and whatnot, so I think that I will grant the request for recusal, but going forward, we need to do that before the application is read and before we have a public hearing.
I did not know until he stood up.
Yeah. Understood. I would ask Mr. Lucas, or do you feel prepared that you can vote on this application?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Mr. Sullivan is recused, and I will ask for a motion from Mr. Mattson.
Yes, so I'll make a motion to approve the variance request as advertised and presented.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mattel.
Okay. So yeah, just to start with, as a general concept, I do appreciate the concerns of the abutter, but in this case, we are specifically the variance is only about how far back from the lot line the sign is being proposed and not its size. And in this case, allowing it to be closer to the lot line would push us further away from the residential properties. So if anything, this would be of a benefit to the applicant to allow this variance, or the abutter. So with that, going through the criteria, I'll take the first two together. The variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. So this sign pole was already in this location, and there was previously a sign there for many years. The purpose of this ordinance is to not have signs so imposing on the street that they're interfering with the safety of traffic. This sign would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood of this, the Route 1 bypass corridor there with multiple gas stations and signs, and would not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. And then the third criteria is that substantial justice is done. And here we're weighing the benefit to the applicant not being outweighed by any potential harm to the public. And again, I do acknowledge that there could be some concern from the public with the illumination of these signs at night, but the variance here is not regarding that and only its location relative to the property line. And not allowing the applicant to place the sign here would harm, so it would not benefit the applicant to prevent them from placing the sign here and being forced to put it somewhere else that could harm the general public even more. And then number 4 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And here we've heard some concern about that, but even expert testimony is not necessarily conclusive, and I do think that allowing this variance is less impactful to the residential neighborhood on Dennett Street, which is adjacent to this property. And then the final criteria is that literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. And here, special conditions of the property distinguish it from others in the area. And the big thing is that this sign pole was already in this location, and it is true that the Route 1 bypass, the frontage of this property, it's a one-way lane of travel, and you have to go under a bridge approaching this property. So allowing the sign to be closer to the street would allow it to be read from vehicles sooner. It's a special condition of this property in combination with the existing sign pole being there. And then finally, this proposed use is a reasonable one. As stated, there was already a sign there, and it's consistent with this type of business.
Thank you. Anything for your second, Mr. Mantle?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Any discussion on the motions? Motion? Okay. With that, the motion is to approve the variance request as presented and advertised. I think I'll start with Mr. Sullivan is recused. Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. Nees?
Yes.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Sorry, you keep blending into the crowd. Your variance request is approved. Okay, thank you. The next order of business is Roman numeral 2, new business B. The request of 371 Lowell Avenue Realty LLC and TMK Laverne, I hope I'm saying that right, LLC, owners and Convenient MD applicant for property located at 1303 Woodbury Avenue, whereas relief is needed for a change of use from retail to medical office and striping on existing pavement for additional parking, which requires the following relief. 1, a variance from section 10.5B 83.10 to locate parking between the principal building and the street. 2, a variance from section 10.1113.20 to locate parking between the principal building and the street. And 3, a variance from section 10.1113.31 to permit parking within 100 feet of a residential zone. Said property is located on Assessor Map 217, Lot 1, and lies within the Gateway Corridor G1 district. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Chris Mulligan from Hopeful Phoenix on behalf of Convenient MD, the applicant before you tonight. With me this evening is David Sanderson, the Director of Real Estate for Convenient MD. The proposal before you is for parking relief at the subject site. This is the now vacant Rite Aid site on the corner of Maplewood and Market Street. The proposal would be to relocate Convenient MD's primary care medical office facility. Currently, there is one on Woodbury Avenue in front of the Whole Foods. We've outgrown that site, and the desire is to relocate the business to 7,800 square feet of the existing Rite Aid facility on the subject site. In order to do that, we need some parking relief. Specifically, the site itself does not have sufficient parking for the Convenient MD's expected parking load. In addition, there is about, I think, 3,400 additional square feet of vacant space. We don't know what tenant will be taking that space, but the current site has 39 spaces. We're proposing to add 10 spaces for a total of 42. The current parking load, if this were all to be...
I'm sorry, you mean 49?
49, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Math is always a problem for me. So if the entire facility is converted to medical office space, we would need one space per 250 square feet, or 45 spaces. The ordinance provides that you can have up to 120% of the minimum, so we would be within a range of 45 to 54 spaces if it is all entirely medical office. What we're proposing is right in the middle of that. Mr. Sanderson will, I can represent that Mr. Sanderson has a lot of experience with these types of facilities, and for this one, our parking requirement will be between 30 and 35 spaces on the site. So if it just stayed as it is, that would leave between 4 and 9 spaces for the remaining use on the property, which is just not enough, and the landlord would not accept that. So that's why we're before you for relief. We need additional parking on the site, and this is a fully developed site, as you're well aware. The existing facility was built in 2008. It's been a commercial site for as long as I can remember. Woodbury Gardens Nursery was there when I moved to town a million years ago. The neighborhood itself, both in terms of zoning districts and the actual uses, is very diverse. There is obviously a plethora of commercial uses across Maplewood Avenue. We've got the Market Basket Plaza. There's the office park behind it. Osprey Village, Osprey Landing is adjacent to that. Across Woodbury Avenue, we have the mobile home park. We also have some additional commercial uses as you head down Woodbury Avenue. And I think most significantly, right across Granite Street, we have 3 single-family homes and a municipal ball field. But it's the 3 single-family homes that I think are the most impacted by this proposal, and that's because the proposal is to site the additional parking in what is now a permitted loading zone, but it is between the building and Granite Street, and it is within 100 feet of a residential zone. So we need three variances. Two are essentially the same variance. They just say the same thing. They're in different parts of the ordinance. But that's to cite parking between a principal building and a street, and to cite parking within 100 feet of the residential zone. The existing row of mature arborvitaes that screen the entire facility from the residences on Granite Street will remain as is. So we believe there will be little, if any, negative effect. There will be no visual effect at all to the properties across the street because of that very significant buffering. As you can see on the proposed plan, we will have slanted parking. That will require not just striping, but also arrows. That will be a one-way travel aisle, whereas now it's a two-way travel aisle that also accommodates a loading zone. It's our expectation and anticipation that that will be reserved for employee parking. The entrance to the facility is on the extreme corner. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but you can see it from Woodbury Avenue. So the expectation is that we would reserve the remaining parking for clients and customers and have employee parking at the parking spaces that we're adding. Beyond that, it's simply taking advantage of the existing built environment and adaptively reusing what is now a dormant space. If we were to try to squeeze additional needed parking elsewhere on the site, we would most likely, if not absolutely, have to expand the amount of impervious surface on the site to get behind what is now the dumpster pad and I think 4 parking spaces off to the right of the site. Obviously, that would be suboptimal on a lot of levels, not just because of the expense, but because we would lose what little green space there is on this site. So that's the project in a nutshell. Again, it's a fully developed site. It has been a fully developed site for almost 20 years. Nothing externally is going to change on the site in terms of its appearance, other than some new signage, additional windows on the facility, and cladding that's consistent with Convenient MD's branding. This will be a primary care facility. It will not be an urgent care facility. So the anticipation is that the clients that are using the site will be there by appointment. There will be very few drop-ins on this facility. So with that said, just to get through the criteria for granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor contrary to the public interest. These two are considered together, and the test is whether or not granting the variances would substantially alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Here, the essential characteristics of the neighborhood will remain unchanged. It's a very varied neighborhood in terms of the uses. Again, there are commercial, residential, and municipal uses all nearby. That will not change. The existing built environment will not change. The proposed parking is adequately screened from the public view by the existing row of arborvitaes and other landscaping. None of that will change. The only other alternative would be to significantly increase impervious surface on the site, which we think would have a deleterious effect on public health and safety. The project requires further site review and planning board input, which will additionally protect the public interest. So we believe those criteria are met. Substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. Here you have to conduct a balancing test to determine whether there's some gain to the public by strict enforcement of the ordinance that outweighs the benefit to the applicant. Here, where we are simply adaptively reusing an existing fully developed site without any visible external changes to the public, we believe that the loss to the applicant, should these variances be denied, far outweighs any gain to the public. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished if you grant the variances. Similar variances have been granted for this property in the past. Your staff report indicates that when the existing facility for Rite Aid was approved, variances were obtained. The zoning ordinance has changed substantially in 20 years. However, one of the variances was parking facilities within 100 feet of the residential zone. So there is some experience with that associated with this project. And I would just point out and remind the board that what we're replacing is a loading zone in the same space. So I guess the question really comes down to, is there a benefit to the public that outweighs the loss to the applicant by replacing a loading zone that could have tractor trailers coming and going with 10 parking spaces for personal vehicles? We clearly think that the balancing tips in favor of the applicant. Values of surrounding properties, again, no physical changes to the site that will be visible from the public, so values of surrounding property should not be affected. And finally, unnecessary hardship. Special conditions with this property include the fact that it is a very large site. It's somewhat oddly shaped, sort of trapezoidal in shape. The property is already developed. We're not making any physical changes to the site beyond striping on the pavement. And the addition of parking is necessary to activate the site. It simply doesn't have enough parking and will remain vacant for a substantial period of time without some relief. If we are required to site parking somewhere else on the site, that is likely to require similar relief, both being close to 100 feet from a residential zone, and also likely to require some lot coverage relief. So we think this is a better solution. The use is a reasonable use. It's a permitted use within this zone. Medical office use is reasonable and permitted by right. The amount of parking that we're requesting falls within the amounts that are allowed under your ordinance. And there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of these ordinances and their application to this property. There is already parking and loading on this site between the street and the primary building, and there's already parking within 100 feet of the residential zone. It hasn't had any negative effects on the neighborhood that we can see, and we believe there's no fair and substantial relationship between those requirements and their application to this particular property. So that's everything I have. I think you should, we've got a project that can be approved by this board, and we would ask for you to do so. If you have any questions, happy to.
Thank you, Attorney Mulligan. Any questions for the applicant's attorney? Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you did touch on one of my questions a little bit in saying that some of the existing parking spots are within the 100-foot setback from the residential neighborhood. I was looking at your two diagrams that were provided, one on page 47 of our packet, the other on page 48. I did not see a delineation or anything, it was obviously a delineation of that 100-foot buffer. Can you kind of state where that actually is? Like how many spots are currently in the buffer zone?
Within 100 feet of the
Residential.
residential zone?
Yeah.
I believe there are at least, well, do we have? So over here, I believe we have 2 spaces that would be within 100 feet and 2 here. And I'm not sure if 1 or 2 here.
Okay. So there is a
That's
dash.
my surmise. I
Yeah.
don't have a dimensioned plan.
Okay, yeah, because there is kind of a dashed line there, but it's difficult to say what that represents. It didn't seem to be, annotated anywhere. It looks like you guys sort of reused some old
That's
plan
correct.
that you
We
that
did.
you found. Okay,
And to be quite frank, the staff report that identifies the relief that was granted in 2006 is what I was going off of when I made that representation.
okay. And then in terms of the other variance, which is parking between the building and a principal street. I know your application, and I don't think you talked about this, but your application mentions that you are burdened by having 2 street fronts, but I kind of see that you have like 3 street fronts. In other words, for your property, there's only one little tiny portion of the sort of trapezoid that your client's property is that actually isn't bordering a street. It seems like pretty much you're bordering a street just about everywhere.
I think that's accurate.
Okay. And then my last question is, so this future tenant does kind of concern me somewhat. So you're saying you're basing your parking on the, 250 square foot per, or 1 parking space per 250 square feet of floor area, which is true for medical uses. And admittedly, per our ordinance, is certainly one of the more intensive parking requirements, but it's not the most intense. So there are some potential uses that could go into that space that would require even more parking. Have you discussed what that might be, or were you planning to put a limitation on what types of uses could go in there?
That is a good question that I'm not capable of answering. That's up to the landlord. I would imagine they're keeping their antenna as far up as possible. The actual ultimate parking load on this site is going to be dependent on what that use finally is. And if we have too much parking because it's a less intense use, we would need a CUP from the planning board. If we don't have enough parking to accommodate that use, we would need a CUP from the planning board. So either way, we're just making we know what our need is, and our need would swallow up 90% of the parking on the site as it is now. So we have to increase the amount of parking. But it is possible that there's a use that requires less, but you're absolutely correct. There is the possibility that there is a use that requires more. But if that's the case, we would have to go get relief, or the owner of the property would have to go get relief to be able to cite that use there.
Okay. And then my last question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, noting that you're not like a walk-in urgent care. So your narrative does say on page 39 of our packet, I think your narrative pages aren't numbered, but it does say that your operational hours are intended to be 7:30 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, which I think is actually supportive of the idea that it would be less impactful on the neighborhood than having cars coming in at 2 a.m. and whatnot. But that said, if this board felt that there was a need for a stipulation to try and restrict the hours, associated with use of the parking spaces that are within the 100-foot setback, is that a good range, or is there something else that your client would prefer?
Again, yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, hi, Dave Sanderson from Convenient MD. Yeah, we're open. We'd like to work with the board, but our primary care hours are 7:30 to 5. Well, that, their office hours, I can't ever see a scenario where, could we extend that to 5:30? There'll be certainly some employees that they're still there at that time, but
We're there early.
yes.
Presumably you would have employees on site before your patients start showing up. Right.
Sounds like a sound business plan.
Yes. All right, thank you.
All right, any other, Mr. Mano?
Question for staff. Since 20 years ago, we already granted a variance for this site to allow parking within 100 feet of a residential zone. Why do they need another variance for the exact same thing?
Because it's an expansion, it's a different,
It's new parking. I mean, it's
More intensive.
yeah, it's more intensive. It's not what the board considered before. The considerations could be different. It's standard for everything that, whenever there's an expansion of use, it comes back, even if there's a prior variance granted.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Neese?
Thank you. I just got a quick question. I know it's less than 100 feet from the zone. Do you know how far it is? I was trying to get an idea roughly, and I'm coming up with somewhere around 60 or 70 feet.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I thought we had dimensioned it in, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I guess we did not dimension it, and I apologize, but I concur. I do believe it is roughly 60 feet.
And that's to the center of the street, the zone boundary?
I think it's to the far side of the street. I don't think that the zone starts in the middle of the street.
Thank you. Does staff know on this case?
I don't know the exact dimensions, no.
Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Neese, got another?
The reason I asked the question is because in one spot in the zoning ordinance, it says when a zoning boundary follows a street, it's assumed to be the center of the street. And I'm just trying to get an answer whether that is the case or not here. Because it's not intended to be a trivia question. I think it kind of bears on how far away the parking is from the actual residences as opposed to the zoning district boundary.
I could ask my question.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's in
To
progress.
avoid dead air. And give Steph some time to do it. Sure, go ahead. Vice Chair.
Yes, you had mentioned these parking spaces would be going where the loading zone is. Are you just eliminating the loading zone, or, okay, yeah.
Any other questions from any members of the board while Steph is looking that up? Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So on the existing site, it shows the drive-through for the former Rite Aid. It doesn't show that that is being altered in any way. What are the future plans for that?
Don't know. That's to be determined. It's possible that the tenant that will take over that portion of the property will have a use for that. It's not part of the property that we're taking over. So for now, it's staying there. Whether or not it's going to be adaptively reused and how, we don't know.
Okay, because obviously by putting parking in the area that was devoted to the drive-through, I realize there's a loading zone back there, but the drive-through will be still utilized while there's still parking, while there's now parking, assuming we grant the variances, there is now parking that would actually exit into the drive-through lane.
Yeah, that is a good point.
And then with respect to well, Steph is still looking up the residential parking piece. You're talking about the 3 residences in the SRB zone. You're not talking about the garden apartment manufacturing housing. Those are I don't know if those actually qualify as residential zone, I would assume so, but Those are outside of the 100-foot buffer,
I believe
correct?
so, yes.
Okay. Stephanie?
Yeah, Mr. Neese, can you just confirm the information you're looking for? You want to know how far the parking is from the center line?
Actually, no, the specific question I was asking is where is the zoning district boundary? Is it the center of the street or is it the far side of the street? And because I'm trying to get a feel for how far away the parking actually is. We know it's less than 100 feet from the zoning boundary, but I'm trying to figure out how far away it is from the residences across the street, those residential lots.
Yeah, in section 10.422.10, says where a boundary is shown as following a street, railroad, or utility, the boundary shall be the center line therefore of, unless otherwise indicated. So, unless there is evidence to show otherwise, that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I'm sorry, can you recite that?
10.422.10. It's under 10.422, interpretation of district bounds.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions for the applicant's attorney, I'll open up the hearing to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone on Zoom? And is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay, seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask for the board's deliberation. Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I mean, certainly this property is bound, has issues with the fact that it is essentially bounded by streets on all sides. You know, previously, as has been pointed out, this board did grant relief for parking spaces to be within the 100-foot setback, although, as we've discovered, we may not know exactly where that is at, but we have some rough idea. And certainly, the applicant has been honest and straightforward that all the 10 new spots that they are proposing are all clearly within that 100-foot setback from the neighboring property, and are all between the primary building and one of the streets, in this case, Granite Street. You know, I think that's understood. One of my concerns really is this future tenant, and it's unfortunate. I mean, if the applicant was taking up the entire space, I could probably feel very, very comfortable about this. But I am given pause for a couple of reasons with this fact that they are leaving almost 1/3 of the total square footage, a little less than that, about 30%, is going to be some other use, which, you know, maybe a complementary medical use, or it might be something completely different. As the chair has pointed out, they aren't under control of the fact that this drive-through still exists from the former pharmacy use for this property. Maybe that might be used, you know, might be a coffee shop, maybe it might not. Could change a lot of the factors, and as the chair has pointed out, and it's something ultimately that the planning board will also need to take a look at, is, okay, how does that affect circulation? Would it drive more traffic up, you know, Granite Street, those sorts of concerns. So I think that's kind of the big unknown in my mind is, admittedly, most of the uses are not more intensive than one space per 250 square feet, but there are some. And, you know, that's just an unknown here, that we're basically approving something that there could be a need to come back for and say, hey, I need more parking. And if you do need more parking, where would it go? Because I mean, this site, I think, is pretty well maxed out. If you kind of look at the grade around the property as well, I mean, it pretty quickly becomes a pretty significant hill on the three sides opposite Granite Street. So that's my biggest concerns. I'm not sure if I can get through them or not, but that's what I'm worried about.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Neese?
Yeah, a couple things. I think this is an unusual property because of where it's located, has been pointed out. Commercial property, it's really fronted on three sides by streets of some sort, so parking is almost any parking is going to be between the building and the street, whether it's a principal street, we can argue. I'm relatively comfortable with the location of this parking. It's in a place that was a loading zone. It's probably close to somewhere between 60 to 70 feet from the center line. I'm sorry, it's probably between 50 and 60 feet from the zoning boundary, which is less than required by the ordinance, but it's probably closer to 70 or 75 or 80 feet until you get to a residential lot. It's not like the residential properties are directly behind it. I understand the concern, I think, about the unoccupied property, but the parking requirements really aren't before us right here now. The issue is, where is the parking, and that's the variance that's being requested. And I am comfortable with the request as presented.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from other members of the board? I just wanted to see. Mr. Rayum.
I was looking, I didn't want to speak twice before somebody else had a chance to speak. Just one other point I forgot to mention too is the, the hours of operation. Certainly what was previously granted for a pharmacy use, you expect a pharmacy to be open certain hours. Trust me, pharmacists there are actually 24-hour pharmacies, but this was not the case here. I would be concerned that the use would be, 24 hours a day, and that there would be parking in within so close to the residential neighborhood on a very odd hour basis. Again, the applicant has indicated that's not the case here, but I don't know if, as a board, we want to make sure that through some type of stipulation or other consideration that it's made clear that that's something that's important to the decision of the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Is anyone ready to make a motion? Mr. Neese?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm ready to make a motion to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised with one stipulation. I want to make sure I word this right, so give me a second. The hours of use for the 10 parking spots added by this variance will be limited to 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. I realize that's a little different than the hours of operation, but I built in a buffer on either side of roughly an hour and a half or 2 hours, figuring that people will show up and leave outside. And this only applies to those 10 spaces. The employees are going to show up before it opens. Some of them are going to stay later. I mean, I'd be willing to modify those if someone wants to, but that's just what I suggested.
Who seconds the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Mattson, your second? I'm sorry. We have a first and a second. Mr. Neese, could you please speak to your motion?
Sure, give me just a second. Just a few opening comments. I think the applicant has made a good argument. A couple things that I'll bring up when we go through the criteria, but this is a well-screened area of the property. If you look at it, the trees that are along Granite Ave make it almost invisible to see the building from across the street, which I think is a plus. And I think this is really a pretty reasonable request that will have no impact on, I don't think it'll have any impact on the residential areas. Going through the criteria, I don't think granting this variance would be contrary to the public interest. Yes, it is within the 100-foot buffer. However, it is clearly about somewhere around 70 to 80 feet from any of the residential properties, which is almost as wide as the buffer is. It will not affect the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. There's no evidence that there's any effect on light and air caused by this location of the parking. It does not alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, which are kind of mixed. I mean, this is an unusual lot because of its location, where it's a commercial property right across from a residential area, and it's kind of isolated from other commercial properties by the highway around it. I think granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. It does provide a buffer between the parking and the space, between the parking and the residential lots, excuse me. Granted, it's not 100 feet, but it's probably close to 80 feet to the residential properties. I believe it will do substantial justice. There's no benefit to the public, that outweighs the loss to the applicant by the denial of the variance. As was pointed out, it would require additional impervious services, which would be a harm to the public in order to accommodate the increased parking needs, or it would bar the use of this building for this type of facility, which again would be a loss to the owner and to the applicant for it. There hasn't been any evidence presented that granting the variance will diminish the value of surrounding properties. This has been a commercial use for a long time. I think the Rite Aid was open much longer than this proposed medical building would open late hours, and there's been no evidence and nothing brought forward that it'll diminish the value. Going to some of the special conditions of this property that I think justify the variance. It's an existing commercial property in a gateway overlay district, not unusual. That's what's in this area. However, what is a little bit different than many of the properties is it's got roads on 3 sides. It's isolated from the rest of the commercial district by a major highway, and it abuts a residential district right close to it. It's an existing structure that had a loading zone that it provides a logical way to increase parking. I've already mentioned that it has the roads on 3 sides, which limits where you can put parking, and so that justifies having it between a road and the building. Owing to the conditions of these special conditions, I don't think there's a fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and specific application to this property.
Okay. Is there anything for the second?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate that to me a very big component of this is this privacy evergreen screening of very solid mature trees that would separate this parking from the residential area. And then finally that this is existing asphalt where you're either going to have vehicles driving or parking here, and I think parking is less noisy, if you will. So it's and certainly having more parking here doesn't hurt the situation with the uncertainty of the future potential adjacent tenant. So.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I have one too. Mr. Am.
Yeah, I will be supporting the motion. As I indicated, I had some reservations about the sort of the uncertainty associated with the unused portion of the building. But that said, that's ultimately going to be an issue for the full property owner, who presumably understands that you know, the parking that's here could determine who could not possibly occupy that without, you know, additional parking, which I think would be very, very difficult on this site. I am kind of concerned that the drive-through is sort of still there, but again, that's something that this will be going for site plan review before the planning board, and they may have some additional concerns about the overall layout of what's being proposed here, and the idea of keeping that drive-through. They're probably better equipped to handle this, and it's, you know, not something that I think should hold this up from a zoning board perspective. And then I do appreciate the stipulation that was put in. I think it's a fair one to you know, ensure that this parking that is most close to the, you know, new parking that's most close to the residential neighborhood is used at more reasonable times.
So, as the chair, I have a question about the stipulation. I asked my fellow board members because I thought I heard the applicant's attorney to say that the additional spaces would serve either part of the building. The one that the convenient MD is going into, and the as yet unnamed tenant is going into the other. So, if I'm correct, I don't know how we can state that the hours of operation for the parking area can be sort of tied to convenient MD. I thought the variance application was to have additional parking for both parts of the building.
If I could just, I think the statement, and I could also be wrong, but I think it was that they were considering the overall parking demand of including the potential future tenant,
That's what
and
I thought.
but that this parking would be for the employees of Convenient MD to free up other parking for the potential future tenant needing more parking than what's there.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
Mr. Neese?
So if the variance applies to the property, wouldn't the stipulation apply to whoever was there?
it does apply to the property, but we're making it specific to one part of the building, to the, not the owner of the property today, but the applicant that's in front of us, which is gonna
I
be
mean,
NMD.
It seems to me that the 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. requirement would apply no matter which tenant decided to use those spaces. That would be my intent.
Okay.
That those 10 spaces on that side of the building can only be used 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., period.
Okay. I think my other second problem with the stipulation is how's that enforced? And how do we know where the employees are going to park? I mean, I think it's probably a minor problem with the stipulation. I think I'm likely to support the motion, but I'm not sure the stipulation is enforceable. So that would just be my comment, but.
Well, that's a good point.
Mr. Ram?
Yeah, I mean, towards that end, you're right. Just like anything that is in our zoning ordinance, anything that we put in for stipulations, it really all comes down to the code enforcement officer, and it normally happens through some kind of community concern that's brought forward, right? So if the community brings a concern forward, then that would be a lever that can be used to go and say, hey, you're out of compliance with the stipulation that the zoning board put in place. Additionally, if a future tenant needs, the parking needs change for some reason, again, that's something that could come back before this board to request some type of a follow-up action by the board.
Okay. So, still not crazy about the stipulation, but anyway, the motion on the floor is to approve the variance as presented and advertised with the stipulation that the 10 additional striped spaces will only be used between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. Is that an accurate? Okay. Mr. Neese?
That's the way I said it, and I don't know if we need to clarify 7 days a week, 5 days a week. Because I didn't specify that when I made the motion,
Well, Convenient MD is only going to be open Monday through Friday, is what they told us.
Right,
so.
but we don't know what the other tenant was. So I
Yes.
would leave that as 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., period. So if another tenant comes in that's open on Saturday and Sundays, they're stuck to the same hours.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the second? Okay. All right. So, the motion on the floor is to approve as presented and advertised with the stipulation. I will start with Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Mr. Rayum,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Mantle,
Yes.
Mr. Neese.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You have your approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, we only have one remaining application, but yet I would like to have a break, take about a 5-minute break, and we'll hear the last application for the night, which is 21 Elwyn Avenue. Okay? All right, thank you. Welcome back to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for January 27th, 2026. We're moving on to our last order of business for tonight, and it is, as soon as I get my chair agenda again, new business D, the request of Bretta Halbut, hopefully I have said that correctly, owner for property located at 21 Elwyn Avenue, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing one-story detached garage and construct a new two-story garage, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow A 6-foot left side yard where 10 feet is required, B, a 5-foot rear yard where 19 feet is required, and C, 34.5% building coverage where 25% is allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 113, Lot 28, and lies within the General Residence A District. Who is here to speak to the application?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of the owner applicant of the property. She is here as well, and Matt Beebe as well, her designer, is here in case you have any design-related questions. The property you're looking at is just over 5,000 square feet. As you noted, it's located in the GRA zoning district. There is a single-family home on the property. But what we're here before you tonight on is a detached garage. It's about a 240 square foot detached garage that's situated, if you look at the property on the plans, to the left side of the existing house, the end of the driveway. As you can probably surmise from my application materials, but as well as the plans, this particular garage is really more like a shed in the way it functions. It's really too small, not wide enough to fit a modern vehicle, and it's pretty much used for storage of outdoor belongings and things of that nature at this point. Certainly can't fit a modern vehicle. So the applicant would like to demolish this existing garage. It isn't in the greatest condition. I think it might have been touched up on the exterior when the former owner bought it, who I also represented. But I know that no work has actually been done to this structure. So with any structure that's of that age, it's in pretty rough shape. So the applicant would like to construct a new garage in the same location that's 2 feet wider and taller than the existing structure that's there. The footprint of the proposed garage would be 96 square feet larger than what exists. However, there is some additional footprint associated with external stairs to the second level that's proposed for the garage. More than half the existing building coverage and setback relief that's being requested does relate to those exterior stairs. And as you'll see, in its existing condition, the garage is non-conforming with respect to the 2 setbacks for which we're seeking relief tonight. With that, I turn to the variance criteria unless anybody had a question for me at this stage.
Any questions before he dives in? Go ahead. Oh, Mr. Nees, sorry.
Yeah, just quickly, do you have the dimensions of the existing garage? I can see the red lines here on your diagram, but I can't really tell.
Only on the site plan. In terms of height, no. That's not provided, however, in the width. Yes, it is 240 square feet, so that's 12 by 12. Yeah.
12 by 20.
12 by 20.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my apologies.
Another
Be 144 square feet, that would be a problem. Yes, no, 12 by 20. Thank you.
All right, please continue.
Yep, no problem. So turning to the variance criteria, granted the variance does not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the public interest. The primary purpose of setback standards like this is to ensure that there's adequate light, air circulation, space between structures on abutting properties. With respect to the setback variance being sought, this is a pretty dense neighborhood. As you can see on the GIS map that I printed out and attached as an exhibit to the written narrative stuff. I don't know if you have the ability to turn to Exhibit A easily, or if I do. Does this thing work, actually? I feel like every time I've ever tried to use it,
It's a pointer. It can't.
Yeah, it doesn't actually turn, okay. I remember at one point there was a way to actually manipulate the screen, but maybe I'm wrong. But as you'll see, pretty much almost everybody in that neighborhood has some type of accessory structure, mostly garages, that do sort of line up with the abutting properties, or that's sort of tucked away in the back corner of the properties. Just kind of a nature of the way that those properties were developed over time after they were subdivided off. The proposed garage here does line up with the neighboring garage at 11 Elwyn Avenue. That's the property just to the left, and is similarly situated to the garage that exists on the rear property at 18 Kent Street, which you can see on the GIS map there. For these reasons, I would submit to the board with respect to the setback variances that they won't have any impact on the light, air, and space of the abutting properties. With respect to the building coverage variance, primary purpose behind building coverage limitations like this to protect against the overcrowding of structures on land. In this case, any reasonably sized structure is going to, on this particular property, is going to require some level of building coverage relief, really anything that you do to the exterior of anything that exists there. Overall, the request is pretty minimal when you consider the fact that the footprint we're talking about is really only being increased by 96 square feet. The exterior stairs account for the rest. And as I did point out, this is I believe, an area of Portsmouth where the zoning standards, the GRA standards, don't really reflect the current conditions on the ground, where most of the properties are undersized with respect to the 7,500 square foot lot area requirement. Many of the properties, as I demonstrated in the application materials, exceed the minimum building coverage and do have accessory structures that encroach into one or more of the building setbacks. I would just point to, and I provided a photo of it with the packet, 35 Elwyn Avenue. It has a picture of a structure that looks almost identical to what's being proposed here in a very similar location on that property. So for these reasons, granting the variance does not overcrowd the land or otherwise alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Moving on, substantial justice will be done in granting the variances. I would represent to the board that it would be a loss to the applicant for the board to deny the variances, to modestly expand the garage as proposed and finish the space above. The small increase in building coverage and the encroachment in the setbacks doesn't alter, again, the character of the neighborhood in any way. I did, again, demonstrate sort of what the surrounding building coverages are on the other properties, provided some photos of other similar structures in the neighborhood. So there would be no gain to the public in denying the variances. Surrounding property values would not be diminished by granting the variances. Again, I think this is very consistent with the character of the neighborhood, where you have undersized lots, detached garages like this. The design of the garage is in keeping with surrounding structures in the area. And I think it goes without saying there is a structure already in this existing location. So there is already impact in the rear corner of the property. The garage will be 2 feet wider. It will be taller than what exists. But one thing I probably didn't emphasize as much as I should have in the application materials is there is a significant grade change between this property and the properties to the rear. It's approximately 5-foot grade change, which is pretty significant when we're talking about increasing the height of a structure in that area. So minimizes the impact of anything that actually goes in that's taller in that area. Finally, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The property does have special conditions that distinguish it from surrounding properties, such as there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions, in this case setback, and building coverage standards in their application of the property. Small size of the property, I think the location of the existing garage, and also that grade change are all special conditions of the property that distinguish it from surrounding properties. The garage obviously predates current zoning, and approximately 50% of it already lies within the building setbacks for which we're applying for relief. Would submit to the board that it is being situated and oriented in a way that is the least impacting the abutting properties, and there really is no way to sort of move a structure around on that property without having running basically into the house or having a greater impact upon surrounding properties. With that, I would submit to the board that there is no fair and substantial relationship between those provisions and their application to the property. Also, that the proposed use is reasonable. This is an accessory building to a permitted use within the zoning district, being single-family residential use. So for these reasons, it is reasonable. Happy to answer any questions of the board. Matt's also happy to answer any design questions.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for the applicant's attorney or the Mr. Beebe? Mr. Sullivan?
Would you please address the final element of the hardship test, to wit, quote, owing to these special conditions, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance to the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of it. Is not the property being reasonably used today?
The property, I would argue, is being reasonably used, but it's not being reasonably used in conformance with the ordinance. So again, you have a non-conforming structure that we're looking to replace, obviously increase the size slightly of that structure, but you can't do anything without that structure, including demolish and replace in kind exactly as it is without requiring relief. So that structure does need to come down, whether it's this structure that's proposed or something else. So for those reasons, yes.
Any follow-up, Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Mr. Ram?
Yes, thank you. So looking at your variance plan C101, it's on page 94 of our packet. As you mentioned, the existing garage dimensions, which are the red outline that's shown on that plan, are 12 feet by 20 feet, as we've worked out 240 square feet. So your argument is that's inadequate for a modern vehicle, yet when I Google what is the standard size one-car garage, it comes back at 12 feet by 20 feet. Why is Google incorrect, or what is so restrictive about the current size of the garage that it's not able to be worked in its current footprint?
I can let Matt respond to that if you want. He has been inside this structure and also is the designer behind the proposed garage, but so if I could.
Yes, why don't you allow the designer come up? Could you please identify yourself and state your address for the record?
Sure, it's Matthew Beebe. I'm the designer of record on the project. My address locally is 94 Pleasant Street in Portsmouth.
Okay.
So the biggest restriction for the existing building, besides its state of disrepair, it's sort of a classic garage built in its time. It's built on the dirt, and the slab is poured between the walls, so it's just been slowly rotting into the ground. But the height of the interior of the structure is such that anything other than a small vehicle, I mean, I have one picture of the owner's Toyota 4Runner, and it's almost the same height as the garage door. So there is a garage door there with an opener, but it essentially is serving this building as a shed. So I would say in respect to the Google comment, I think typically when we design garages, we shoot for 12 feet of overall width for each vehicle, but you have to make allowances for the width of the door and room inside to be able to get doors open and get cars in and out of. So we often have to play around with where the structural supports are, the Lally columns, or we do beams that are spanning the entire distance by themselves. 20 feet, I haven't designed a garage in my career that's only 20 feet deep. That just leaves. Can you get a car in there? Sure. You probably couldn't get a full-size pickup like I drive, especially if it has a tow hitch on it. And if you want anything else in there, sleds, a snow blower, a lawnmower, you either have to hang it or you have to have another accessory structure on the property to house those items.
Sure. And so I guess probably you're the right answer person, but we'll let Attorney Durbin decide. But okay, so towards that end, and Attorney Durbin kind of touched on this a little bit, that putting it anywhere else would be problematic. But that said, all of the expanded footprint that you're asking for is all encroaching within the setbacks, i.e. you're moving it 2 feet closer to the side setback and then the additional 4 feet-ish or whatever closer to the back line, and then adding on this set of stairs as well. Why couldn't you, sort of starting with the current corner by the house, why couldn't you start with the opposite corner closest to the sidelines and then sort of move the new footprint in the other direction, which would be more encroaching upon the, allowed building area rather than in the setbacks?
That's a fair point. The first thing I would say is that the distance between the garage and the house now is less than 4 feet. So if you bring that further forward, the first thing you're going to do is encroach upon the windows that were put in for the kitchen when the house was remodeled by the builder prior to the current owner purchasing the house. So, clearly we make some design decisions based on how can we preserve what's already here without having to redesign the existing house to accommodate this structure. So the first concept generally is to try to find a way to make it fit with the room that we have, knowing that it's already an existing non-conforming use and the hardship inherent in the property because there's just not enough square footage in GRA when your lots are less than 5,000 square feet. We make that judgment call trying to figure out what is going to be the best way for the owner, for the people to the rear of the property, and then the property that's immediately abutting to the north, which I don't know if you can tell very easily in the city tax map, but that property is right on the property line. So the one that is at the corner of Elwyn and Rockland. Yeah, you have a pretty good view of it there.
Yeah.
So.
You mean that structure?
Yes. So, we've made the judgment call to go 2 feet closer in that direction because that property, that structure is already on the edge of the property.
And then lastly, if I may, so the stairs are the other element of this project that's further encroaching on the back setback. Why were they not placed on the side of the structure, on the interior side of the structure, i.e. you could have them going up? I mean, they're shorter than your 24 feet.
Yes.
So you could have them going up along the sides and then maybe have a landing above your current entrance on the first floor that would then serve as your entrance to the second floor. Why was that not considered?
We did consider bringing it on the patio side, so between the garage and the house where it's definitely closer than it looks in that image. So from the back of the house to the back of the property line is a terraced patio. So there was some consideration of putting it there, but if you look at the roof design that we came up with in the initial concept, we would then have to create a dormer in order to get the stairs up there.
Sure.
And in my opinion, that was going to be an element that might have made the building seem heavier and even taller. I mean, it wouldn't actually be taller, but from certain vantage points, it might be less desirable than the simple gable roof that we came up with.
But it would still be likely just like a dog shed type dormer.
Yeah,
right?
right.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant's attorney or the designer? Okay. Thank you very much. I'll now open the public hearing. I would like to invite people who are in favor of the application to please come to the podium. Okay, there's no one on Zoom. Are there people who are in opposition to the application? Could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Hi, Bill Arakian, 18 Kent Street. I'm the abutter to 21, the rear of my property abuts 21 Elwyn. I had a quick, I guess, procedural question. I had a letter from another homeowner on Kent Street that they wanted submitted to the public record that they did not make in time. Is that best to submit to you, or should I read their letter at some point, or?
You can submit it for the record. If you could just, if you would like to read it into the record, it looks like it's somewhat lengthy, but.
It's a page and a half. It's not too bad.
Okay. If you would like to read into the record on behalf of that person, that would likely use up your 5 minutes, so you would have to just come back and speak.
Okay.
On your own behalf.
I'll start on my own comments then, and I'll come back for theirs,
Okay.
if that's okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Bill Arakian, reside at 18 Kent Street the past 22 years, and am the rear abutter to 21 Elwyn. This proposal seeks to demolish a one-story garage, construct a new two-story structure consisting of a garage and second-floor living space. As an abutter, I'd be directly and uniquely impacted by the cumulative effects of the multiple requested variances, particularly when combined with the increased height, mass, and proximity of a two-story accessory structure. While the applicant may point to existing nonconformities, it's important to distinguish between what currently exists and what is being proposed. 21 Elwyn's existing garage already contains nonconforming setbacks. However, the proposal substantially increases the degree of nonconformity. Specifically, the existing rear setback is approximately 11 feet, where 20 is required by code. The applicant now seeks to further reduce that setback to 5 feet. Likewise, the existing left side yard setback is approximately 8 feet, where 10 is required, and the proposal would further reduce that to 6 feet. The applicant, therefore, does not improve or even merely continue an existing condition, but instead significantly intensifies nonconformities. Moreover, once the existing garage is demolished, the replacement structure is expected to conform to current zoning unless a true unnecessary hardship is demonstrated. That burden has not been met here. First, the applicant has not demonstrated unnecessary hardship. This property is already an active and reasonably residential use. The requested relief results from the size, height, and placement of a two-story structure rather than from any unique physical characteristic of the lot. This is a design preference, not a zoning hardship. Any hardship claimed is therefore self-created and does not justify the requested variances. Second, the magnitude of the requested setbacks is substantial and not necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. Reducing the rear yard from 20 feet to 5 feet represents a dramatic departure from the ordinance and places a very large structure far closer to abutting properties than intended. Similarly, reducing the side yard from 10 feet to 6 feet further intensifies development along the property line. These reductions enable an overscaled structure rather than a reasonable residential accessory use. Third, the proposed building coverage of 34.5%, where 25 is permitted, demonstrates overdevelopment of the lot. Building coverage limits exist to preserve open space, limit visual bulk, and maintain neighborhood character. Exceeding this limit by nearly 10 percentage points compounds the impacts created by the reduced setbacks and increased height. Fourth, the combined effect of increased nonconformity, expanded building coverage, and two-story height would result in a structure that is out of character with the established development pattern in the immediate neighborhood. Where a garage exists, abutting properties are all single-story. I had submitted some written comments that had some pictures on page 3 and 4 if people are interested in what the garages right around the abutting properties look like. Lost my place, sorry.
You have a minute and a half more,
Okay.
just so you know.
Where a garage exists, abutting properties are all single-story. This proposal introduces excessive mass and proximity that's inconsistent with the intent of GRA district. Fifth, these variances would have a direct adverse impact on my property as an abutter, including increased visual dominance, loss of light, sky exposure, as well as reduced privacy due to the height of the structure, location of stairs to the second floor, required lighting, and close proximity of the proposed structure. These impacts will negatively affect the value of my property and are precisely the impacts the side and rear setbacks and building coverage limits are intended to prevent. Finally, granting variances that increase existing nonconformities and allow substantial overcoverage would undermine the spirit and intent of the Portsmouth zoning ordinance and set a concerning precedent for the over-intensification of residential lots. For these reasons, as an abutter who would be directly affected, I respectfully request that the Zoning Board of Adjustment deny the requested variances for the proposed two-story garage at 21 Elwyn Ave. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Going up. Would you please identify yourself and state your address?
Yes, indeed. I'm Cliff Hodgson, and I'm at 10 Kent Street. So I'm corner at the back corner as an abutter. As has been stated, all the properties in the neighborhood, at least on that block, are basically only 1/8 of an acre, so they're kind of close quarters. I understand the size of the garage being important. My garage is barely 21 feet. It's not quite 21 feet. And it's a single car garage. It was built in 1926. And I always measure how big my vehicles might be before I consider buying it, because I know how big my garage is. Having said that, my suggestion or possible revision might be like, make the garage like only 22 feet long and move the stairs, as one of you suggested, around the side of the yard on the inside, not getting close to anybody's property line. That would make it less objectionable to as far as reaching to the property lines on two sides, and it might afford a little more privacy. Granted, the garage that's there right now is a single story, and they want to make it at least twice as tall. I'm not sure how much taller it's going to be other than the existing garage that's there right now. But those might be suggestions, is maybe cut a couple of feet off the back of the garage, or push them up and forward possibly, and put stairs around the side. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this application? You can come up and pretend you're the other person now. If you please state on whose behalf you're speaking for and their address.
Sure. This is submitted for Dave and Sandy Michaelides of 19 Kent Street.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the proposed new two-story garage at 21 Elwyn Ave. After reviewing the application submitted, we're opposed to the proposed development for the following reasons. Criteria 1, the variances will be contrary to the public interest. The proposed new development is exacerbating a pre-existing condition for an ancillary structure, garage, and making it worse by increasing the intensity of the land use and decreasing yard sizes, setbacks, and open space. Building coverage is increasing from 31.4 to 34.4, where 25% is specified. Building height and mass are increasing, while the front, side, and rear setbacks are all being reduced even further. The property is presently non-conforming with respect to lot area, building coverage, and the side and rear setback requirements set forth in the Portsmouth zoning ordinance. This is a dense area and should not be allowing more density. Criteria number 2, in the spirit of the ordinance observed. Is the spirit of the ordinance observed? No, the spirit of the ordinance is not being observed. In 2020, the builder received 3 variances for the primary residence, and no one objected. This is not a vacant lot. There are existing structures on the lot with zoning laws in effect that the owner knew about when they purchased the property. No one is denying the owner use of the land. 5 to 6 years later, the owner now wants relief for an ancillary structure, garage. Is the design team offering any compromise relief for the mass of a 2-story garage that increases lot coverage while decreasing setbacks to the detriment of the neighborhood? If a new structure is being constructed as they described, this new garage should conform to the prescribed ordinances and not require additional variances beyond those that already exist. Demolishing a garage doesn't guarantee the owner the grandfathered footprint to rebuild a larger structure to the abutter's property line. The proposed development will have a negative impact on preserving the essential character of the neighborhood while impacting the visual environment. The applicant states that they are replacing a garage of unknown age. A single-story garage in the neighborhood is not the exception, but the norm. The design team selected photographs of two-story garages to suit their needs. They did not choose other garages that were torn down and replaced in kind as single-story ancillary structures. Many homes in the area do not have a garage at all. Contrary to their application, their two-story garage is decreasing sight lines, destroying the visual environment. Since none of these conditions currently exist, they are altering views and destroying the existing visual environment. Criteria 3, granting the variance will not diminish surrounding properties. The proposed variances that reduce the existing setbacks will alter the visual environment, cause potential harm due to falling snow and ice, and increase stormwater on abutting properties. The height of the structure will decrease privacy in surrounding yards and make them less desirable. Criteria 4, denial of the variances results in unnecessary hardship. There are no special conditions, and it does not result in a hardship. This is not a vacant lot. These are existing structures with zoning laws in effect, and they knew about them when they purchased the property. The owner occupies a very large, beautiful home. Failure to obtain a two-story garage and studio is not a hardship. Criteria 5, substantial justice. Building a new garage should not exempt you from conforming to current zoning ordinances. The applicant is not constitutionally allowed to ignore zoning ordinances in effect when the property was purchased. The ordinances did not change. They were fully aware of what they're allowed to do on the lot in this zone when they purchased the property. There's nothing unique about this property. No one is denying their rights to build a new structure that conforms to zoning. In summary, we believe the applicant's proposed development could have made a better attempt in meeting the spirit of the board's oversight and intent, not what appears to be the exact opposite. There's no hardship. This is not for a primary residence. It's an ancillary structure. The variances requested are in contrast to the public interest and are not in the spirit of the ordinances this board is in charge of. The proposed new development is exacerbating a pre-existing non-conforming condition and making it worse by increasing the intensity of the land use and decreasing yard sizes, setbacks, and open space. For all the previously stated reasons, maybe a single-story garage with less variances would be a fitting compromise. Thank you, Dave and Sandy Michaelides.
Thank you. Would you like to submit that for the record? You may hand it to Steph. Mark it received? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this application? And is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of the owner and the applicant. I know the board can't consider this, but it is a bit unfortunate to get some of the abutters' concerns when I know the applicant's representatives did reach out to both of the objecting abutters that are here, seeking input on the design, only to get comments last minute, as well as a submission that shows like some superimposed structure and that appears completely out of scale with actually what is proposed here. I do have a photo and actually a depiction of what this would look like to the rear property line, to the rear property line. And if you look at the submission by the abutter at 18 Kent Street, where they've superimposed the structure to make it look larger than what's actually being proposed, they've also included a photo where you can't even see the top of the existing garage. In this particular instance, there is that significant of a grade change that you literally cannot see the top of the existing garage roof. And while what is being proposed is an increase in height, it's also minimized by the fact that there is a significant grade change. And if I could just pass out an accurate depiction of what this does look like to the rear property line and the existing fence back there, since that, since they did submit pictures that are supposed to be representative of what this is going to look like. Feel like it's fair for the board to actually see what it will look like.
You may hand it to Mr. Lucas, who will pass it down.
If this were a property that were 7,500 square feet in size, this would be 23% building coverage. Here, the request, the increase in building coverage, yes, it is an increase by 3%, but a significant part of that is associated with the external stairs, which is really not the same as an enclosed structure or the impact that an addition per se on a home would have to an abutting property. The actual increase in footprint is 96 square feet here. It's, I don't want to call it an imperceptible difference, but it's a very minor difference over what exists. And it would appear that a lot of the objection from the abutters is on the height, but again, you have about a 5-foot grade change here between this property and the abutting property. That is a special condition of the property that does distinguish it. But this is the character of the area. It's a densely constructed area with accessory structures right on abutting property lines. And as the abutters admitted, there are other two-story garages along there. And sure, we did pick examples of others because that's, you know, naturally that's what you do when you're showing the character of an area. There's obviously one-story garages as well. There was a comment about the stairs I just wanted to address. If there is concern about the stairs in the back, the applicant is willing to move those to the right side of where the existing where the proposed garage is. And if there was concern about the length of the garage, the applicant is willing to shrink it by a foot or 2 feet. That's as much as you can basically get away with and get a modern vehicle adequately into that space. But they are willing to make those changes. Probably had these concerns been addressed in a forthright manner with them, they would have addressed them with the abutters, but they weren't. And so they put together the design they thought was most functional with respect to their property.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to, for, or against?
Hi, Bill Arakian, 18 Kent Street. I just wanted to clarify a couple comments that I heard. One, the picture I submitted was our best attempt. It says right on there, scale unknown, because we don't know. It's a 6-foot fence. It's a 19-foot structure, about 3 fence heights tall. That was our rough guess. And we did not try to surprise the applicant with anything. I did reach out to the designer and say that I'd be opposing it. The response was, it's probably too late to change anything for this meeting. So that was the extent of the conversations we had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have a hand raised online.
Okay, I'm gonna go to, okay. We'll go to the person on Zoom. And could you please identify yourself for the record and state your address?
Barbara Jenny.
Barbara Jenny
Recording
from
in
94
progress.
Pleasant Street. I'm actually speaking in favor of this. I used to live in this neighborhood where we actually built a 2-story garage and an art studio right up against our property lines. And I'm in favor of this as in support of the arts in Portsmouth. Last fall, the Arts and Cultural Committee submitted their report to the City Council. The City Council voted unanimously to accept that report and forward it to the Planning Department and Planning Board to incorporate into the master plan. Artists in the city certainly do add to the vitality of the city. They add to the economy of the city. So having an artist being able to work on her property certainly is in the public interest. and in our experience, adds to the property values in the neighborhood. And again, overall to the economy of the city. Certainly the cultural report spoke to live-work housing and affordable live-work housing, but it also in general spoke to supporting artists living in our city and being able to work in the city. So I am for this. I don't think it's adding a lot to the existing small building that's there, and I think it would be great for this artist to be able to work from home. It was wonderful for me to be able to work from home while I raised my children in that neighborhood. So fully support. I think it's a great use for that building.
Thank you. Ms. Jenny, could you please state your address and also your association with this project?
Yes, so Barbara Jenny, 94 Pleasant Street, Apartment 2. I'm an artist in the city. The designer happens to be my husband. And I really am speaking to the fact of supporting the arts in the city. One of the Cultural Commission members has asked me to be vocal about supporting artists living in our neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against this application? I think I saw somebody get up in the back there. Speak now or forever hold your peace. So there are seeing no further speakers on Zoom or here in the chambers, I will close the public hearing and I will ask for the board's deliberations.
I'll start with some comments.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I guess first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the neighbors here, and this neighborhood has been through a lot. We've seen various applications on Kent Street and Elwyn Ave. I guess, so specifically for this application here, a couple of thoughts. You know, I looking at it, I thought maybe it could be pushed further away to avoid the side yard setback, and maybe even attached to the primary dwelling. But you know, I'm not trying to get too into dictating design and whatnot, but it was something to consider. We heard some comments about design considerations from questions Mr. Rayom asked. But there are other examples of detached garages like this with a floor above where the car would be parked. Typically it's within the roof line, so not a full second story. This proposal also essentially has that, where the eaves do drop below the ceiling height of the second floor, but it is clearly it's a taller structure than what's there. They do have the factor of the grade on the rear with that retaining wall stepping up to the rear abuttor. That would be working in favor of this application. That rear abuttor does also happen to have a garage close to the property line. I don't know if that hurts or helps this application. And then similarly, the left lot abuttor also has their garage, which happens to be attached very close to that property line. I guess my thoughts are that because those two garage structures are already there, that this might not be as bad because it's less imposing than if the person's residences were, the neighbor's residences were right there. I agree a lot of what's driving this is just the undersized lot here, but whether or not that constitutes a hardship, considering that the other lots are also undersized, I guess I'm still pondering that portion.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts from any other board members? Well, I was not expecting that. Okay, so there we go.
Well,
Mr. Rayom.
For thoughts. Yeah, so this application, I guess my main concern is that in every possible dimension, the applicant is asking for more and more relief, right? So from the side yard, moving closer to the side yard, the rear yard, moving closer to the rear yard. I know part of the applicant's representative's argument was, hey, part of it is just a set of stairs, but in some ways, that actually from a privacy standpoint is even worse, because you know that somebody's going to be going up and down those stairs, they're going to be coming out, they're going to be like kind of staring into your property. I'd almost prefer like a blank wall. You know, even if it had a window or something on it, you're not expecting somebody to be staring out the window all the time. Those stairs are going to be used all the time, and you know, somebody going back and forth. So I think that's a particularly egregious in position on the back property line. And then height. I mean, you're talking about, as the designer kind of indicated, the current garage is probably a little short, probably still usable. But that said, I mean, you're adding a whole second story. Again, seemingly for a positive, beneficial purpose of creating an art studio, but all right, that's what this current person might be using it for. In the future, it might be used for something very different. We don't know what that is, right? So it's this. Our granting is in perpetuity. It's not for what the current property owner is planning to necessarily use it for. We certainly know that it's not going to be outfitted as another apartment. Could be changed at some point in time. That would potentially have to come back before this board. But the bottom line is it's a much taller structure than what is there now. Agree, there is a grade change, but one way or another, even the applicant's own depiction of the situation does indicate that it's going to be much more visible. Currently not visible, will be visible, and oh, by the way, much closer to the back property line. Fully agree in this neighborhood. I mean, you kind of see this pattern of, home, garage, but again, as it was developed in the early 20th century, those garages and those other out structures tended to be pretty small. And, now over time, people are coming back to us and saying, hey, I want something bigger for my SUV. I want, some kind of usable space up above, because usable space is at a premium. And it's an opportunity to build that out. The other aspect, I mean, I think overall square footage wise, I think the applicants made a pretty good argument that the increase in lot coverage is not substantial. And I would agree with that part. My concern really is the encroachment into the setbacks. Is there some way to get out of it? I understand the applicant has kind of said, well, maybe I can, if you want to stipulate something less, you want to stipulate stairs on the side. I guess my personal thought on that is I would rather not stipulate that. I'd rather, if the board felt like this was too much of an imposition, having the applicant come back with a new design that in my mind probably would not necessarily invoke Fisher v. Dover, depending upon what they did. That could then be something for the board to consider.
Okay. Any other thoughts from any board members? Mr. Sullivan?
Well, I certainly agree with Mr. Rayom, but I'm questioning how we get to that. If the board votes tonight, it has significant and lasting effects on the applicant. So I guess what we would have to do is ask the applicant if they would agree to continue the matter to allow them to modify their application for the reason stated by Mr. Rayom.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts, or Mr. Rossi?
With all due respect to Board Member Sullivan, there is a straightforward path here. We're asked to make a judgment on this particular variance for this particular design. If we make a negative judgment, again, as Mr. Rayum pointed out, they can come back with a new design. It's not up to us to anticipate what that design might be or should be or could be. If it was significantly different, it clears the Fisher v. Dover hurdle, and we can consider a new application for the property without any prejudice from this one. That's it. That's my comment.
Your follow-up, Mr.
Well,
Sullivan?
with all due respect to Mr. Rossi, who I do respect, if the board should deny these variance requests, then the applicant's ability to come back with another design is seriously limited. This is the Fisher versus Dover situation that I'm sure you're all aware of. And that's why I said what I said, but it would really be the board's decision as to whether to ask the applicant whether they wish the time.
So anything from this side of the board? All right, I'll take a motion, so.
Wait, we got two.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Delayed.
I was looking right at the two of you.
I know, but I hesitate.
We blinked and we put our hands up.
Mr. Mannell, I'll go to you first.
While I agree with Mr. Sullivan about trying to get this into a more favorable design, in my mind, the only way to do it is deny the variances, simply because it's we approve as applied. Granted, we do add stipulations, but we are all stressing about the back setback, the stairs, the length of the garage, to give that more room. Obviously, if we make our denial on that basis and they come back with a design where the stairs are on the side, it's 2 feet shorter, that goes beyond Fisher v. Dover. They've come back with a different application, and Fisher v. Dover would not apply, especially when they're addressing our exact denial criteria. I'd rather do something like that and keep the integrity of the quasi-judicial board than becoming a design board like the HDC or the planning board, where we have no legal standing after that.
Thank you.
Thoughts?
Mr. Neese?
At one of my first meetings, previous member M.L. Geffert suggested a motion when we had a situation similar to this, and unfortunately, I can't recall it, but it was something based on,
Deny without prejudice?
yeah, that might have been it. And I was trying to remember the RSA for denial without prejudice, and it's in here somewhere.
In our Board of Adjustment Rules and Regulations under miscellaneous, and the applicant will be allowed to request a postponement of the application, provided the applicant can provide just cause for the request, otherwise a denial without prejudice will be in order for the board. So that is when the applicant is asking for a postponement. Vice Chair Mattson?
Yeah, just if I could, I guess I'm looking for a refresher of sorts. I thought we have previously considered whether to deny and have an application come back versus essentially table or continue an application, and I forget, but I thought there was a reason why we didn't do that, and that's why we did that might have been a scenario where we did the deny without prejudice, but there is still a tabling or continuing option, or is that not?
The board can do that. It's, the board can ask the applicant to to a certain extent, go back to the drawing board or not go back to the drawing board, but address concerns and then come back, continue it to provide more information. I think in this case, we're looking at, that would actually incur probably different variance relief, and a little reluctant to do that. So, Mr. Ram?
Yeah, so my 13 plus years on the board, we've done it both ways. There's both pluses and minuses to both approaches. As Mr. Mannell notes, we don't want to become the Historic District Commission and constantly have people, well, what about this and do that? And we aren't designers, and I'm always a little hesitant to bring up sort of design questions, but at the same point in time, I do think some of the design choices in this specific application really drive a lot of the relief that's being requested and are kind of central to this particular application. We've also denied it, and there is the risk of Fisher v. Dover, which it's really the applicant's attempt to try and overcome that deficiency. I'm not as concerned it's as high of a bar as what Attorney Sullivan is indicating. I would say that it's the board's determination on whether or not the criteria is, the application is truly changed. I would say the history that we've had as a board is in a case where we think we've been heard and the application certainly reflects a lot of those things, that generally we do not invoke Fisher v. Dover. Again, and the application may or may not fail based off of its new merits relative to that. Certainly a change in setback requirements and those sorts of things would be something that I've traditionally said is something that changes the, makes the application significantly enough different that it is not the same application that's before us. But as Attorney Sullivan points out, there is some risk associated with that. I would say, in general, it's been our cleanest approach towards something, especially if we really feel like, you know what they're asking for it just isn't there. If you could maybe stipulate your way in a little bit, or if you had a couple specific comments that you could send back to the applicant, it might be worth giving them the additional time to come back. My personal feeling in this case is it's kind of a non-starter. I want to see something better out of the applicant. So that's my thought.
Okay, so I will say that I appreciate the design. I think it's really lovely. So I commend the work that's been done on this. I agree with Mr. Rayum. I think, I mostly agree with Mr. Mantle. I think that it is cleaner and preserves the board's integrity and our deliberations as a quasi-judicial body to actually either just vote the variance down or up. So with that, I would ask for a motion if we're ready for a motion. Oops, I just lost my packet. I don't know if Mr. Rayum is...
Sure, Madam Chair. I will make a motion to deny the requested variances.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is that Bob Sullivan? That's a very emphatic second. Okay, Mr. Rayum, you're...
It only really needs to fail on one criteria. I think it's kind of failing in two basic areas. One is the hardship criteria. What is unique about this property? And I recognize that the applicant is saying, hey, I'm an undersized lot, but there are a number of other undersized lots. It is, the setbacks that are there are being encroached into in new ways, and I think that there's just isn't sufficient uniqueness about this scenario. I mean, the garage was placed there, but they're really sort of expanding off of that, and they're also asking for a pretty substantial increase in vertical height. All of which I think are there's just not simply enough justification that this property has some otherwise unique characteristics that say that that requesting that level of relief is appropriate. Second is the general characteristics of the neighborhood isn't in compliance with the ordinance. I mean, I think we are trying to keep these structures of a minimum size. Kind of see it throughout the neighborhood where there is, one-story ones. I know the applicant kind of showed us, hey, here's an example of a 1.5 story. Okay, really wasn't super tall. Kind of said there's another one that's 2-story, like theirs. Still wasn't a full 2-story in my mind. Still more like a 1.5 story that they showed in the pictures. I just don't think that there's enough of a characteristic that's been established here to say, hey, look, there's a strong correlation in this neighborhood that says this type of construction and these types of setbacks and garages of this size are a characteristic of the neighborhood and are keeping with the neighborhood. So that really is, what speaks to our first two criteria of granting the variance would, keep with the characteristics and the spirit of the ordinance. So I think it fails in both of those areas.
In both the hardship and spirit and intent. Is that correct, Mr. Ram?
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, do you have anything to add for your second?
Based upon the comments of the abutters, I doubt whether they met any of the variance criteria. Moreover, I said the things I said about Fisher versus Dover because it seems unlikely to me that they would come back with a proposal that didn't contain a 2-story garage, the essence of this request. And therefore, pretty much anything they would want to come back with is going to have a serious Fisher versus Dover problem.
Okay, thank you. So the motion on the table is to deny the variance request as presented and advertised. I will start with Mr. Nees.
No.
Mr. Mantle.
We're voting on denial.
Denial.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson.
No.
Mr. Ram.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The variance is denied.
5-2.
5-2. Okay. With that, that is the last item on our
I'd
agenda.
like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We don't second.
We
she
are
has
adjourned.